So it's wonderful to welcome everyone to our 7th week of the Food Systems Seminar. We've been exploring food rescue innovation, and we're sort of moving through the food supply chain and also the food system as we do this. And now we are getting towards the kind of final part of the food system, and we are exploring what happens to food once we leave the food retail system. And so part of that involves a network of nonprofit organizations and also grassroots hunger relief organizations. And so, as I mentioned before, our scheduled speaker for today was Maxwell Burton, who was the founder of this really innovative effort called Peddling Relief through the Cascadia Bicycle Club. And this organization, since before COVID, but especially during COVID, has been focused on activating volunteers to address food insecurity and also food waste through a variety of mechanisms. And so, as I mentioned before, Max is not able to join us today, but I am here in his stead to present a bit of background on the project, and then we're going to collectively watch a short video that was recorded in 2020 that's about 15 minutes long. And so for folks who are planning, who are enrolled in the course and who are planning to write a reflection, you'll still have plenty of content for the session today. Okay, so I realize that we have an interdisciplinary group here. So I want to give a brief introduction on food banks and food insecurity before we get into the details of the Peddling Relief Program, which heavily interacts with the food bank network. So nationally, more than 38 million people in the US are considered to be food insecure. And as I'm sure many of you are aware, the pandemic has really increased food insecurity across the United States, but also globally. And specifically in the United States, there are many situations where households might not qualify for federal nutrition assistance programs. And so the food bank network is really a critical gap stop for a lot of these families and individuals who have kind of fallen through the cracks of the federal system. Food insecurity impacts BIPOC communities at a higher rate due to systemic racial injustice. And food banks and food assistance really does play a critical role in addressing acute hunger issues, so immediate acute needs. It does not, of course, address the underlying systemic inequities that lead to food insecurity. And, that traces its roots to economic insecurity, which are a whole other, number of issues that we could discuss. But today we are going to focus on the stopgap system of food banks that provide a service not only as food rescue organizations, but also in addressing critical food insecurity needs at the local level. So something that's surprising is that a third of food distributed by food banks is food that would otherwise be lost or wasted along the food supply chain. So we've been discussing this issue of food loss at the agricultural level and food waste, especially in retail and at the household level. So up to 1/3 of this food that's distributed through the food bank network comes from farmers, from food retailers, and through food drives. And so this is all donated food. The rest of the food comes through other sources, but 1/3 of this food represents 1.2 billion meals annually. So that makes a significant impact when we're looking at the issue of acute food insecurity. So the day-to-day hunger needs that can be met through hunger relief organizations like food banks. And so this is a great infographic that kind of demonstrates how exactly food banks interact with the food system. So we can see on the left of this, we've got surplus food from farms, from government commodities, grocery and retail, fisheries, food manufacturers, restaurants and hospitality, vegetable markets and farmers markets, and also consumers. So this is all collected and then distributed through the food bank. And the food bank network also interfaces with community service organizations. And many of these community service organizations are formal, some of them are informal, like the Peddling Relief Network that we'll talk about today, and they actually deliver food to hungry people. So this is a snapshot of the Instagram page from Peddling Relief, which I think really kind of demonstrates the spirit and also the focus of this grassroots effort. So technically, the Peddling Relief Project is a nonprofit organization that focuses on food rescue and also delivery. And so they kind of stylize themselves as that they do community bike rides in the spirit of strengthening aid networks and increasing food security. So again, it's a grassroots network of volunteers that connect with different hunger relief agencies and also food producers and distributors across Seattle. So you can see from some of these images, really kind of the grassroots spirit of the effort. And it really, again, completely relies on volunteers. So some of the details, this volunteer network delivers food from food banks across Seattle to families in need, but they also serve two really other important functions in terms of the informal food security network. They restock little free pantries, which you may have noticed in your neighborhoods. So kind of like the little free libraries, they're little free pantries that may have canned foods or shelf-stable items. And they also restock, there's a network of community refrigerators that they restock as well, which is really awesome. So the refrigerators don't need to only host shelf-stable food, but they can also accept fresh produce as well. And this is really a movement that's happening across the country in urban neighborhoods, which is really exciting. They also bike fresh produce donated from community gardens to food banks as well. So we can really see this effort as kind of a last stop, last mile, last 5 mile, really critical effort to make sure that food can be used, a food that is meant for humans can be used for humans, and it really serves folks who may be the most in need. So this is a snapshot of the Peddling Relief Project's current volunteer opportunities. And I'm sure if Max were here, he would probably be trying to onboard the whole lot of you as potential volunteers. He's a very enthusiastic community organizer. And so this is a map of the different sites. You can see they're all across Seattle in the north, in the south, in the central district. And this kind of highlights that to the left on the tab. And then when you click in deeper, if you wanted to be a potential volunteer, for example, you might see if you were located in the North Seattle area, what are the opportunities right now? How can you jump in and help? And also learn a lot more about, acute food assistance services that exist in the Seattle area. So these are some of the North Seattle volunteer opportunities that are open for February and March. So it gives you a sense kind of the range of different activities and organizations that Peddling Relief works with. So one of the opportunities is food rescue with the University District Food Bank. So there's group rides to rescue food from 2 local grocery stores and then to deliver them to the University District Food Bank. So we're kind of getting insight into, again, the last mile, last 5 miles of how perfectly good food that would otherwise go to waste can actually be deployed to be served within these hunger networks. The middle opportunity is restocking little free pantries in North Seattle with food and hygiene supplies from the North Helpline Food Bank. So another example of how this really plays out on the ground. And then the final opportunity they have listed is grocery delivery. So delivering groceries to families in need, and then also restocking little free pantries for the University District Food Bank. So again, one really innovative example of a project that saw a need and was really activated and became much more robust during the pandemic. And so we're going to hear more about this effort, and I'll cross our fingers that this in PowerPoint link works. If not, I'm going to pause and we'll pop out of the PowerPoint to just access this recording directly from the internet, but maybe it'll work. We'll find out.
Welcome to Seattle Bike Blog TV. I am your host, Tom Fukulora, and I'm joined by Maxwell Burton, who is co-founder of the Seattle Pedaling Relief Project alongside Michael Lang. And yeah, tell me a little bit about, in general, what is the Seattle Pedaling Relief Project?
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. So we are like an all grassroots volunteer-run organization, and we're basically a group of cyclists who have gotten together to figure out ways for the Seattle cycling community to fight food insecurity and to give back to their community through these different volunteer opportunities through different food banks in the Seattle area. And it's just it's a great way for people to learn more about food insecurity issues in their local community and neighborhood, and also really get to know their neighbors and get to know some members in the community who they might, not otherwise really interact with a lot. And it really gives our volunteers, it lets them ride their bike, but like ride their bike with a sense of purpose, So a lot of people are, they have extra time on their hands, and they're feeling like that extra time should be put to good use in terms of giving back their community and making Seattle and the world a better place. So basically, it was kind of a different requests from the food banks to have us help with their kind of food logistics, both on the back end and the front end. And it really, it's been great for the food banks because having cyclists available to them makes them really, really flexible in terms of like how much food can they pick up and when, and just having, an army of bikes available to them, it reduces their kind of logistics overhead a lot in terms of like securing volunteers who have access to cars and who might have limited time available. With us, we can kind of scale up and down how much capacity they need to both go out and bring donated fresh produce into the food bank and also to send out these kind of bags of food that are put together by the food bank to let somebody eat very healthily for 1 week. And yeah.
So how did this idea even begin? What inspired you to do this?
Right. So it's been kind of a long journey and a very educational journey. I had originally met Mike, but had totally forgot about it when I was helping you and Kelly move. And then we were just like,
thank you, by the way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That was fun. And like, oh man, that was great. And I like the trailer that I use is the same sort of trailer that I use to move after your furniture. Yeah. This came out of Mike and I working together to, we were trying to put on the next Seattle disaster relief trials. So the disaster relief trials are, it's like a trial competition that's meant to simulate a natural disaster happening in an area. And the idea there is after a natural disaster hits an area, cargo bikes, and especially cargo bikes, are going to be the most flexible way to transport needed goods and medical supplies and water and different things around. So one of the best things about bikes is how flexible and how small of a footprint they have. So the idea is, how do you train up a bunch of cargo cyclists who are interested in this sort of thing so that they can immediately be part of the response Mike and I were originally gearing up in order to hold the next disaster relief trials this year in September. And then guess what happens?
A disaster.
Yeah, a disaster. Exactly. So like as soon as the school shut down, as soon as the school system shut down, Mike and I met again, and we basically just cleared our original notes completely and just started anew. And we were like, this isn't a trials anymore. This is no longer a disaster relief trials. This is a disaster relief, you know. And we both knew that because Cascade shut down, because Bikeworks shut down, both of those organizations have a huge dedicated base of volunteers who are still going to want to ride their bikes, and they're going to be, and they're antsy to help. And I started reaching out to a few different food banks who were then ramping up their home delivery kind of systems. One of the big impetuses of this idea was the Thanksgiving event that you organize every year. And my thinking was, oh, what if we did like a Thanksgiving but in reverse and also every week? And that's how actually I originally sold it to the Rainier Valley Food Bank. But vast majority of volunteers that I have coming to help me out for every delivery event, they live right in that neighborhood. They're exploring their neighborhood, learning more about their neighbors, getting to know their neighbors, but then also learning about kind of the history of food justice in their neighborhood, and also just learning about the food bank system. A good number of our volunteers have then went on to sign up for volunteerships in their local food banks. So this is also it's kind of it's raising the visibility of this super valuable social services and food security infrastructure that we have here in Seattle.
That's great. So if someone wants to help and join the cause, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so the best way to do that is to go to our website, and that's sprp.bike. You can also go to our Instagram page, and that is pedaling relief project. So pedaling_relief_project. And both of those will point you to our sign-up sheets. And the sign-up sheets would you sign up for to go on a bike delivery with us at one of the food banks that we work with. And we have delivery opportunities and volunteer opportunities on Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and then on a few Sundays, a couple of Sundays.
It's a lot of work.
I know. Yeah, this has been the most fun. This has been the funnest thing and the most fulfilling thing that I've ever done in my life. And that's what's really driven me through working this hard and putting this many hard hours into organizing and connecting and facilitating all these amazing ways that cyclists can help their neighbors in their communities here in Seattle.
Are there other ways people can help other than hauling food? Do you need other kinds of volunteering?
Right, yeah. So I'm looking, I'm trying to put together a good system to allow people to volunteer with us kind of on the back end. That would be answering questions that other volunteers might have, or connecting with more food banks, or kind of reaching out and asking different other grassroots organizations, such as there are a lot of these very small community-run kitchens that kind of cook food for everybody in the community and distribute it for free. So one great way for people to help is if they know an organization that needs help, delivery help, or just, really needs a way to transport fresh produce or food or other supplies from one place, or other like medical supplies, or like personal care kits and stuff from one place to another, definitely reach out to us and let us know.
So does the Seattle Pedaling Relief Project itself need funding? Like, what are its costs, and do you need help with that, or are you mostly focused on the organizations, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Everything has been happening so fast that we're just kind of now starting to think about that. We do have these fleets of trailers that we lend out to our volunteers. A big part of this is how do we make cargo cycling, how do we kind of broaden the reach of cargo cycling? How do we make cargo cycling as inclusive as possible? And a big part of that is, how do you turn pretty much any bike into a cargo bike? It's with a bike trailer. So we've been really focusing on letting anybody and everybody who is interested in volunteering for us, we've been reducing the barriers that they might come across in terms of like, oh, if they don't have a pannier, if they don't have a rack, if they even don't have a backpack, they can still volunteer with us because we'll provide them with a bike trailer that they can load bags into and go out and care for their neighbors. So that's a big part of where the costs have been coming from is we bought a fleet of 5 trailers about a month ago, and that cost about $500. So Mike and I have been sharing that. And then there's the, there's just like the human part of the costs of all this. I've kind of given myself the freedom to make this like a full-time project for me over the summer, but there's definitely gonna be a time in which I'll have to start like pivoting away in terms of like figuring out what my next career is going to be. We're trying to figure out how people who, if they're not able to volunteer with us, but they still want to support us, we're trying to figure out how people might be able to do that in terms of like a tip jar or just some other way that people can give funds to us that we would then put into like buying gloves and sanitizer and more trailers and other stuff like that, and possibly even supporting the people who are managing this. I want to empower the volunteers in each neighborhood to almost take ownership of the volunteer opportunities, the community building aspect of it. And so I want to put together a system in which I have like a group of volunteer leaders who are on the ground at each food bank, and they're the ones who are facilitating and managing the volunteers as they're showing up and as they're loading their bags and answering questions and working directly with the food bank coordinators. And my end goal is to kind of pivot and be more on the administrative side, where I'm just making sure that everything on the top end is running smoothly, making sure that the volunteers are getting their like reminders that they have like a delivery coming up at a certain time, and also making sure that people can sign up easily, and if they have any questions about the organization itself, answering those. But I really, I took a lot of inspiration from my time working with the Major Terror Project at Cascade, and a lot of one of the key aspects of the Major Terror Project was empowering local cyclists, especially young local cyclists, to be MTP, Major Tiller Project ride leaders, where you would have people, you would have, young adults who were just out of high school or just out of college, who went to the high school or went to one of the high schools in the area that the club is supporting, and that way you have kind of a direct connection of like mentor mentee between the ride leader and the students. And I was thinking along the same lines, where I really want to empower my volunteers who live in the neighborhood to take more ownership of the deliveries and the other kind of volunteer events that we have for that community. We have in that community for that community. So it's this interesting little like chapter or cell structure, where rather than this citywide organization collecting volunteers from all over Seattle and sending them out again all over Seattle, I want to basically have this very intimate kind of community focus, where I'm taking volunteer cyclists from the community and sending them back out in the community so they can learn more about, their neighbors and the street.
Okay, so this is the end of that pre-recorded interview, and we're so lucky to have that, given that Max wasn't able to be with us today. So I'm going to briefly stop sharing so that we can join together in more of a discussion. Now, again, Max, for those of you who maybe even arrived halfway through, our presenter for today, due to some unforeseen, very last minute circumstances, maybe 2 hours before our seminar start, was unable to join us. And so that's why I was sharing a bit of an introduction to the project. And then we were really lucky to have this pre-recorded video interview, which was really nice, kind of like a fireside chat of Max being interviewed by the Seattle Bike blog. So usually we would have time for Q&A right now, but since our presenter isn't here live today, I thought that we could use the next 10 minutes or so to share observations about the project. And I think especially within the context of not only the seminar theme, but also some of the other presentations that we've seen in the seminar throughout the course of the quarter, many of which in the beginning focused on for-profit efforts to reduce food loss at the agricultural level, in the retail sector. Again, we heard from Liz Ficus last week at the Seattle Public Utilities, sort of presenting the public sector perspective. So I think it's really interesting now for the group to consider the role of both the food insecurity nonprofit sector that's made up of food banks and other types of organizations, but how grassroots efforts like peddling relief can also play a role in reducing food waste and loss, and also helping to assuage some food insecurity issues at the neighborhood level. So we're going to kind of open it up as a forum where you can share your reflections and thoughts, observations. Maybe you do have a question that you want to pose, and somebody here may want to engage in that question. So feel free to raise your hand and or unmute yourself, and we'll look forward to hearing from you right now. And actually, while we're maybe waiting for folks to jump in, I see Tiana put a post in the chat saying that you volunteered with Maxwell at the beginning of peddling relief and for a good amount of 2020. Yeah, would you mind unmuting if you're around and share with us a bit of your experience?
Totally, yeah, I'm on campus. I'm gonna keep my video off. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, you're coming in great.
yeah, I just thought, well, Maxwell's not here, and just to share like a tiny little context from my own experience. Maxwell is great, one of my favorite cyclists in Seattle. And I live on Beacon Hill in Seattle. And so when the pandemic started in 2020, I had some extra time and was looking for like a mutual aid effort that I could like fairly conveniently get involved with. And as a cyclist and someone who also like cares about the local food system, it was just kind of a great confluence of both worlds. So I volunteered every Wednesday for like, I think spring until fall of 2020. And we took food from El Centro de la Raza on Beacon Hill to different neighborhoods in South Seattle. And then also partnered with the Rainier Valley Food Bank and another nonprofit organization called Common Acre, which they facilitate like urban farm sites in different places in Seattle. And it was really cool. It was like, it was just like a fun, I think the element of like fun and volunteering often that gets left out when we're talking about, you know, food insecurity or food access work, that it can involve an element of just like joy, and really loved, I think, the ritual of doing that every week with a great group of folks. And I also learned a lot about like thinking what Maxwell said about wanting to educate like whoever was volunteering about their, you know, very local food system. I learned a lot about my neighborhood in terms of like demographics, as far as like we actually have a fairly elderly population on Beacon Hill. And so one of the main gaps that we were trying to bridge with Peddling Relief is that El Centro didn't have the resources to donate food and get to all these people who were suddenly like, you know, in their homes and didn't have the ability to get to the food bank, but that was their main source of, you know, supplementary food for the week. And so just like helped with some problem solving around that. Like, how do you even communicate to these people, you know, when English is maybe not the first language, and don't have access to maybe the technology that someone in my generation is just like really used to using. And then also just seeing like El Centro as like a nonprofit organization, but also as a food bank go through their own transitions and like systemic programming during the pandemic, and like how to turn from that being maybe, you know, 25% of their programming to suddenly being just this like huge hub for the neighborhood. So yeah, I'm super grateful that it's still happening. I haven't been able to tap in since 2020, but would like really encourage, there's some great efforts still up in the U District with the U District Food Bank. I think it's still right on Saturdays that happens. And it's a great way to just like observe and like be a part of connecting those gaps between like food waste at the University District Market, and then bringing it to the food bank and like seeing how that happens. And yeah, like no role is too small too. Like someone is always needed to like make a Google form or make a phone call. And I think that I really appreciate Peddling Relief just like leveling the playing field as far as like who's able to contribute how. So that's my little spiel. But I hope that if it's of interest to you, like look it up on social media. They just are a really cool group of people.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. What a wonderful coincidence that we have a volunteer in the course, and great to hear more about your direct experience in Beacon Hill, and also, like you said, kind of pointing out how by participating in the volunteer network, you really get to see firsthand what happens to, you know, food at the UW farm and how it gets to the next place. You know, one of the many ways that it gets transported to, you know, hopefully serve people. That was really great. So we'd love to open it up. We have a couple more minutes for folks to share their thoughts or reflections on this particular project and how it fits into the overall theme of the seminar. Anyone else out there? having reflections, having insights. Great, Renee, feel free to unmute yourself and share.
Okay, I guess I had a comment. It would be interesting to see what kind of insights they could bring to like the Seattle Public Utilities like ideas and like program they're trying to establish. I think they have a lot of like feet on the ground experience with the people itself. So it would just be interesting.
Yeah, Renee, that's a really great comment. And actually, when I was putting together the list of folks who were going to present for the seminar series, I learned about peddling relief from, I don't think it was directly from Liz, but it was through folks who had participated in a research effort to learn more about the transportation aspect of food waste in the city of Seattle. And so peddling relief came up as this really innovative grassroots effort that, you know, again, it is still very much so at the grassroots level. But like you said, Renee, they really, through their work, because they're working so closely with community members and neighbors and neighborhood organizations, they have so many direct insights to share that could potentially really provide contributions to Seattle Public Utilities and other organizations too. Any other comments, folks, or questions? I've got so many questions for Max that I would love to ask. We'll send him a list, a follow-up list when he's able to answer them. We did just get a really great comment that from Lori, who thought it was cool that the organization tackles actually delivering food to the people, so directly engaging. We've seen a lot of our seminars have been about upcycling or reducing food loss, that are looking at kind of more distal methods of getting and producing food, which is great. But it's a whole other task to actually get the food to the people. Makes getting groceries super accessible. Yeah, and we've definitely seen, that's a really wonderful comment, Lori. And we've seen a ton of transportation in the local food system and then nested at all levels as we've gone through the pandemic. All of us individually probably can share our own stories of how we've had to adapt how we get our food in addition to other resources. And so when we think about how kind of traditional organizations like food banks operate, they've really had to innovate and really pivot and change their way of doing things, and being able to access this type of community-based grassroots network of cyclists who are kind of at the ready to help make that happen is really fantastic.